There you go, Darren, everybody.
Thank you, Laura. Thanks for organising this one. Really appreciate it. And thanks for everybody coming down. Hopefully you'll find it useful. So I haven't really prepared anything because everything we're going to talk about today is ingrained up here anyway. So please feel free to ask any questions you want. There's no such thing as a daft question, because if you don't know the answer, then it's not a daft question, is it? So feel free to ask away. The first thing I'd say is that I'm not here saying that I know everything about everything. I don't. Right? If I don't know something, I'll tell you. What I'm going to do, I think the best thing for these forums is to give you some information so that you can make notes, that you can go away and actually do the research yourself. And I'll get on to why I think that's important in a second, because I think that the where we are, the energy of the planet is in an energetic transformation of disclosure and ascension. And so therefore part of our role in that is to listen to what we want to listen to, and then go away and research that ourselves and make our own minds about what we feel is right for us. So a lot of guys know me already, and they'll know that I say when we do the one-to-one sessions on Zoom, that I always say I'm not gonna advise you what to do. Oh, what do you advise, Darren? I said, I'm not going to do that. What I'm going to do, I'm going to give you specific information to relating to your circumstances, and then you can then decide what's right for you, because that's what it's all about at the end of the day. For me, having gone through this journey quite a long time, there's a lot of people that want to be right and tell you about to do things, and you've got to do this and you've got to do this, and this is the only way, and there is no only way, because this system we've been born into has been going for over 8,000 years, so it's well practiced. And we've found out about it in the last 2 minutes, and then how the hell can we be experts in that system when we've not really had the time to become experts? So the idea here is to give you information, and then if you think it's a load of crap, it's a load of crap. I will not take I'm not bothered. I'm not emotionally invested in what we're going to talk about today. It's all your journey, and I respect that. So a little bit about me. I won't bore you. But I've been a trust practitioner for over 30 years. Originally, when I was a trust practitioner, it was more as a financial advisor, giving people advice. And the one thing that I very quickly learned was the people that we felt would give us great legal advice didn't. And that was as an objective observer, as a financial advisor, sending my clients to people in the high street called solicitors and accountants, and finding that they weren't really giving the advice that I was hoping that they was going to get. And that culminated totally when I completely immersed myself into estate planning in about 2000, when I found out about enduring powers of attorney. And enduring powers of attorney, a legal instrument that you can use to nominate somebody to manage your affairs if you can't, rather than the state. So they're quite useful. Yeah, I was dealing with an age group of people at that time over 60s. So I'm nearly that age myself, so when you get to that age, you realise that you're not going to live forever. Right? It kind of suddenly dawns on you. And so, an enduring power of attorney is probably more relevant for people of that age group than the younger age group, because they're the ones that lose capacity. And so I rang my go-to solicitor up, bless him, he worked out of North End in Portsmouth. And I said, what's these enduring power of attorney? Are they any good? And he says, yeah, they're brilliant. I said, oh, great. I said, what do they do? He said, well, if you lose capacity, then you need one. I said, so all my clients over 60 should have one then? He says, yeah. I said, so when I'm sending you about 200 clients a year, how many of them did you arrange enduring powers of attorney on? Oh, I haven't. I said, why not? He said, well, they never asked me for it. I said, well, do they know that they need it? Well, no. well, how are they going to ask you for something that they don't know they need? And that is symptomatic of the legal profession. And then when I worked for a very large company called Think Group, I learned that their insurance that they carry to protect themselves against complaints from you guys and us guys, right, is non-existent. They don't want to give advice. They just want you to tell them what you want. So if you say, look, I want a trust, right, all right then, there's one, there's a trust. Right, I want a will, there's a will. They don't give you any further information unless you ask for it. So that's great if you know what to ask for, but if you don't know what to ask for, then it's a bit of a problem. So which is why, and I'll talk through the bedrock of estate planning as I learnt about it 30 years ago, and why it's relevant to everybody in a room, or the vast majority of people in a room. Yeah? By 2013, I got traded in for a younger model. The wife traded me in for a younger model. And so I had a kind of a bit of an epiphany, because I thought marriage was for life. And I knew I needed some sort of help, so I was drawn to holistic healing. And this lady said to me, oh yeah, you asked for this. And I'm saying, you're what sort of an idiot would ask for this? Well, you. And she said, oh, this was a pre-sold contract. And the interesting thing that she learned very quickly about me is that I didn't argue about that. I just said, yeah, that sounds like sense. And so most people, when you say pre-sold contract, they think, what the hell is he on about? He's lost it again. Right? And I learned very quickly that about healing, about natural healing, and about how natural healing had been disguised for the form of money. So we naturally can heal ourselves, but we don't believe that, and we're not in that consciousness because the planet is enveloped with a fear-based consciousness, which means that we're dumbed down. We do not access our skill set, and they don't want us to access our skill set, because when we do, we are very powerful, because we have souls and the elite don't, and that is a gift. And that comes back onto free will. The gift of the man and woman is that we have free will. We have a karmic responsibility, and so therefore if someone says you should do that, they're interfering in your free will, because our free will is to create our own path and speak our own truth and know thyself. And once we know thyself, then we can manifest anything we want. Because when we know ourselves, we know what we truly want. And until we know thyself, we don't know what we truly want, so we don't know what we can manifest. And so that's why we get a lot of horrible things, because our thoughts and our words and our speech become things. So, oh, that's never going to happen. You just made it reality. It's never going to happen. Right? So, but we have the ability to manifest. And so, when 2020 came, and the dreaded V, I was already a crackpot by my mates. Oh, he speaks to dead people. Right? Yeah. I said, don't speak to dead. Yeah, you've been to. I went. The story behind that is I went to Arthur Findlay College and did a mediumship course. And me being me, went for a mediumship course and ended up on the advanced one. That's just how the universe works, I'm afraid. Right, so my friends already thought I was a crackpot. So when 2020 March came and was in lockdown, my daughter said, you come and live with me because you're not being on your own. So I said, oh, all right then. So 3 dinners. She said, are you worried about this? I said, no, why? Because I live forever, don't I? I'm soul. So this is just a car. It's a vehicle. So I'm not, if I'm going to die, no one's found a way out of it yet. So it's going to happen. If it's COVID, it's COVID. But I did buy it, to be fair. I did buy the COVID narrative for about 9 days. Right? And I thought, this ain't stacking up, this. So, but because I was always a crackpot, because of my healing, all my friends just thought I was just another crackpot story about this ain't real, and of course it's real. But it was a great experience because there was one burning question I'd had about protecting assets that never was properly answered. To me, I never felt like I'd had the real correct answer. I'd had answers from some very clever trust practitioners. And that was, when we set up a trust, and it's a statutory nature, the maximum that we can put in there without being taxed is 325,000. And how come the Duke of Westminster's just died with 300 million and he'd got all his assets in a trust and he didn't pay one bean of tax? How does that work? And the answers were, well, his family fought in the war and they've had these trusts a long, long time, and so therefore it's a completely different down. Fair enough, you've got to work with the statute book. So when I worked with the statute book within trust, I got so proficient at trust planning that I could dance my way through the statute book, so it didn't have as much an effect as it set out to do. But it still had a lot of restrictions. Where the Duke of Westminster, he's got 300 million in one. Well, he hasn't, he's got several different trusts. But why is that? And the one thing that I learned, and this is the key thing that I would say that everybody look and research, jurisdiction. Jurisdiction is the key. The reason why he can put 300 million into a trust is because of the jurisdiction of the trust. And the jurisdiction of his trust means that it doesn't have to conform to acts and statutes. It is exempt. Now I'd sort of tipped my toe in the water with this in my statutory world, because I used to get people come along. I had a guy who was selling a big company, 10 million, he didn't want to pay capital gains tax, and he didn't want to pay inheritance tax. Well, I happen to know a barrister that could set that trust up. And basically what he did is he danced through the statute book to get through the immediate tax problems, and then he shifted the trust offshore to Belize. And because Belize doesn't pay UK tax, then the trust was tax exempt. That was my first lesson in jurisdiction, and dopey here didn't realise. I didn't get it, I just thought, well, yeah, it's in Belize, it's tax free, so that's fair enough. Right, but that's what happened, he shifted jurisdiction, did the barrister. Right, and so that guy moved his assets he sold for 8 million that was worth zero, so the CGT bill was quite big. He got around a big tax bill, and by shifting jurisdiction, and that is the key. And you see, the rich do never enter the same jurisdiction as we were forced into. And we were forced into this jurisdiction because we were our inherent rights were removed. So what happened when you were born? None of you remember this, but this man or woman sat with your parents, your mum, and said, look, I've got this great idea. What we're going to do is we're going to make your baby a slave. Right? And don't worry, it's all good. All you've got to do is have this certificate. It doesn't say you're a slave, but that's what it means. And then because of that, we've got the ability to tax this person and basically run their life for them. And they've got no way out of it. Well, there is, but we're not going to tell you that. Right? And you're going to inform us of this baby, because we cannot do anything until you inform us. So we're going to call you the informant now. And basically, this slavery is actually illegal, but volunteer slavery isn't. So by you getting the certificate of birth, you're volunteering your child into slavery for a lifetime. And the good news is, 3 years after that baby dies, then we'll come and collect his real estate. And that'll become all ours. Now that was never said, was it? So that is a simple case in law of equity of non-disclosure of a material fact, in that I was never told about that, so how can I comply with it? Yeah? But then you bring in Uniform Commercial Code and you apply, so you get these people out there saying, I'm not a driver, I'm not conducting commerce. Who conducted commerce coming here today? Answer, anybody in that jurisdiction. If you're walking around in your all caps name and you're using your all caps name and you haven't rescinded that all caps name and you haven't rebutted that presumption of that slavery, then you were conducting commerce under Uniform Commercial Code by privilege. Because you've got a driver's license, didn't you?
What if it's out of date?
Sorry?
What if it's out of date?
Well, it's out of date. Well, some people could argue that you're driving without a licence, but if it's out of date, that's probably better. But I'm not here to advocate. So we'll say, Darren Norman said don't drive with a licence. I'd rather see all rights reserved on the licence rather than that, but each to their own. But the point is that nobody came and begged you to have a licence. That's in fact the other way around. You begged to have a licence because you applied for it. Yeah, so you, by applying, you've got to understand the consciousness of that is that you are saying there's a higher authority than me because I'm having to apply to that higher authority to be able to drive. So you are recognising by that application their authority. In the same way where you get these people that are writing what's the word? They go on these marches and then they write these petitions. Petitions of plea and acquiescing to their authority. Right? If you don't have to do anything, you don't come to me and say, Dan, can I go to the toilet? You just go. Right? If you was asking me to go to the toilet, then you would be saying that I've got a higher authority than you. Yeah? So these where we're sending all these things into the government, we don't consent, or would you consent? And that's jurisdiction. Jurisdiction is who you are. Do you want to be the living man or woman, or do you want to be the slave, the pauper on your passport? The incompetent that crosses their name on the voting counts. That's why it's a cross. Because you're incompetent. You are saying, I am incompetent. And I'm giving you power of attorney over me, whoever I voted for. Why don't you write your name? See, in olden days, you didn't write your name because you couldn't write. So you did a cross. And the cross was, you're incompetent. You're not educated enough to make your own decisions. So somebody else has to. That's what was clever, what we've done. So that was kind of my foray into this world. Start with jurisdiction. And understand that completely. Because when you know that, then you will know instinctively where you want to be. Either the public or the private. So, getting to trust planning and what it means, why it is relevant to everybody. And this is why. Imagine married couple, they've bought the first house, they've got 2 little children, and they decide that the financial advisor said, go and see a solicitor because you need to have a will. So they're going to the solicitor, their perception is that they're going to get some great advice, because it wouldn't be a solicitor, would it? Even though there's a meaning about the word solicitor, but we'll not get into that. Right? So we go in there, we sit in those nice office, and he's there with all his files all over the place. And he says, what do you want? Oh, we need a will. This is how the conversation goes. I've listened to them so many times. Right, so who do you want to get your estate then? So the stock answer is everything to each other, and then the children in equal shares. When we both die. Happy with that? That sounds like sense, doesn't it? And they'll go, right, you then, I'll write your will for that. So they get a mirror will. Everything to each other, and then when they're gone, to the children in equal shares. Sounds ideal, doesn't it? My question would be, do you mean that you want each other to be financially okay when the first person dies, and you don't want to disinherit your children? So what I'm saying is you want to make sure each other are financially alright, and you don't want to disinherit your children. How many people do you think would say, that's what I mean? Majority? They do. Yeah? That's not a mirror will. And the reason why is because when we've got this mirror will that passes everything to each other, what we have to understand is that when the first person dies, the legal owner of all the assets now that was part of that relationship are now solely the survivors. So Mr.'s died, Mrs. is now the owner of everything. That doesn't sound too bad so far. However, Mrs. decides sometime in the future to remarry. Now we've got a problem. Well, she hasn't. The children have. Because now that marriage certificate, right, puts them under the eyes of the law as one, and therefore there are potential claims that wasn't there before the marriage. And what are those potential claims? Those potential claims are divorce. So if they get divorced, then the whole pot of assets is going to be split by a judge. And that could be 50-50. She might be lucky, she might have married somebody really, really rich, so it's his children that are going to suffer. Yeah? But the divorce settlement will place those assets in terms of a claim vulnerable. Okay, she may not get divorced, she may marry and love him for the rest of her life and then die first. And so then through the death claim, the husband has a claim against the estate under the 1975 Inheritance and Dependence Act. So even if she's got this will, and I'll tell you what most people say, oh, you don't have to worry about that, Darren, I've got a will. When did you make the will? Oh, well, with my first husband. Oh, right, okay. So that's still going then? Oh, yeah, still got it here, look, yeah. Do you want to just Google how a will is revoked? Why, how is it when you get married again? Marriage revokes a will. So the lady sat there thinking she's got this great will still that passes everything to her children, doesn't realise that the marriage to the new chap has revoked the will. So it's now null and void. Been thrown out of court. So there's a death claim. So she could die first, or if she was, if it's after 1990, which it is, and she goes into care, then her assets could be used to pay for care, which is about 60,000 a year these days. Average length of time in care, 7.5 years. It's Concern's figures, not mine. 7.5 times 50,000 is about 375 grand. So people come to me, I don't want to pay inheritance tax. Have you done anything to protect your assets against care? Oh no. Well, that could be a bigger bill than the actual inheritance tax. Yeah? And speaking of which, and also the estate is in inheritance tax, or could be, if it's worth over 650,000 for married couples, or $1 million if they own property and they qualify. If it's over $1 million, there could be inheritance tax. And then, after all that, we have to then administer the estate when they die. And what does that mean? Well, it means that the court, England and Wales Limited, tell UK Limited, HMRC, someone's died. And you might need some money from them. So what we'll have to do is we'll administer that. So your executors have to breathe life into the will and go to the court and say, can we have a grant of probate, please? So I've got one at the moment. Lady's mum's died. The house is worth 750 grand. So there's an IHT bill of 98 grand and she got no money. So she says, I'll sell the house then. I'll move out. I'll sell the house. Court say, you can't. Why? You can't sell it. Why not? Because you haven't paid your tax bill. So she goes, well, how do I do that? Not a problem. Right, 98 grand. So she goes to the HMRC and says, I ain't got 98 grand, but if I sell the house, I'll give you it. Well, we want our first instalment. How much is that? 14,000. Well, I ain't got that. Well, then you're in default. So we're adding interest on it now. Right, can we have a grant of probate, please? No. Right, you'll have to get a bridging loan. And that's what they do, they get a bridging loan. And if anyone's ever done a bridging loan, they're not cheap. Yeah? In actual fact, she could have got round it if she'd used a proper probate specialist, because I could have got her, tried to get a partial grant on credit, which says to the revenue, look, let us sell it. Let's be smart here. Let us sell it. You're going to get your money. We'll sign the partial grant on credit to say that we can sell it, and the first person that's going to get their money from the sale is you. right? Because this lady's quite special. She's had a stroke, by the way, through all this. Yeah. Because it's created, because she doesn't know a way out. And unfortunately, I'm not a magician. I'm not doing the probate. Somebody else is doing it, her accountant. And I said, well, did you get a partial grant and credit? Well, what's one of them? Well, that might have been a solution, so that's what we're trying to get. But my point of telling you that story is, you're back in the system. You're in their jurisdiction. Your best day's work is never to be there, in my humble opinion. So, if the assets were held under trust, then you wouldn't have to go through that. If it's statutory, the trust has to have less than 325,000 in it. If it's a private trust, then you can have as much as you want in it. And then you don't have to go through that process. Because you see, whilst the physical man or woman has died, the trust hasn't. Who's the legal owner of the asset? The trust. So this person's died that set up the trust. Well, that's irrelevant as far as the trust is concerned. That just carries on going. So therefore, there's no need to get a grant of probate. And that means that nobody gets a re-recording of the assets that are about. The grant of probate is like a nice enforced census. Because you're reporting everything that the person that died owned, and then you're telling them who's going to get it next. So that's what wills do. We have to understand that will is just an expression of wish. A will can be challenged by people who may believe they have a claim against your estate, whereas a trust is not an expression of wish. A trust protects, a will doesn't.
I've got a question. So, say if you've got a brother or a sister who are from a previous marriage, and their parent dies, has that brother or sister from the previous marriage, even though they have nothing to do with the family, if they got a call on
So is that what, sorry?
If you've got a brother or sister, which say my old man had from a previous marriage, is that brother or sister, you know, you ain't seen him in 40 years, has he got a claim on the...
It depends on how the previous marriage was annulled. So what you've got to do when you get a previous marriage annulled, or you get a marriage annulled, there's wording on the, I don't know if it's a decree absolute or decree nice, I don't know, but there's wording on it that says this is full and final. If there isn't that wording on there, then yes, they can come and get it. And that's a good question, because what you've got to remember is about these claims when we say husband and wife, and then the wife gets married or the husband gets married. Remember then, when the children say they did inherit, they get all those claims and threats again. Divorce claims, creditor claims, care fees claims, inheritance tax claims, right? They get all those, you recycle the same problem to the next generation. So getting this, you've got a £2 million estate, you pay £1 million is due for inheritance tax of 40%, that's 400,000. So out of the 2 million, 1.6 goes to the next generation, 2 children. They've already got an inheritance taxable estate, so that 1.6 million pays 40% tax when they die. Right? Which is another 560 grand. So now, out of the total 2 million, 960 went to the tax man. That's why you don't want it in the system, and that's what I've been advising on trust for 30 years. Don't make the mistake of recycling the problem.
Darren, I've heard you say that there's different kinds of trusts. It says they can still come after you, one kind of trust.
What kind of trust?
Yes.
Right. Good question. That is a statutory question. Right, because if you have a private trust, you only need a private trust. Private trusts are less expensive than statutory trust planning. Because with statutory trust planning, you've got bare trust, interest in possession trust, discretionary trusts. Yeah, you've got all these names, and they're all designed in interest in possession trust, all designed to do certain things, right, depending on what the settler, the person that's got the assets now, wants to achieve. Right, so you've got bereaved minors trust, you've got bare trust, you've got all sorts of different types of trust, depending on what you want to achieve. Whereas with a private trust, what you've got is one trust. That's it. They're the list of beneficiaries. What we might do is quarantine the assets, as some people know in here that what we've done with their trust is so that if there's any controversy with a certain asset, then we will quarantine it. So way we do it without being too technical is you have a master trust and then you have sub-trusts. And the master trust delegates to the sub-trust, and the sub-trust then I don't have trustees, they have managers. And so it's a way of making sure that they can't be challenged, but then you quarantine each asset into each trust. So I've got one now that I'm doing. They've got a buy-to-let, they've got a main residence, and they've got a block of flats. The buy-to-let's got capital gains potential against it. So we quarantine that into a sub-trust, so that if the revenue ever challenge that trust, you're not intermeddling it with the other assets. Whereas the problem is that people out there selling private trusts and sticking everything into there, so the revenue come along and they say, right, that buy-to-let property's capital gains tax, we're going to have that. Oh, and by the way, we'll have a little go at the other assets as well, because they're in the same trust. So if we collapse that trust, we collapse them all, which is what they want to do. Whereas if you quarantine the trusts, right, the assets into separate trusts, then effectively, if they ever go one trust, then the other two are safe still. I'm not saying the trust will get defeated, I'm just saying, as we all know, people can have a go at them. So, I don't think that answers your question, but there are different trusts in the statutory world, depending on what they're trying to achieve. The standard one is a discretionary. Yeah, does that answer your question? Yeah? So what discretionary means is that a discretionary trust is that I am the settler, you guys are all my beneficiaries, I'm Jay, and Laura, nearly called you Justine there, and Laura are my trustees. And so so somebody comes along and says, right, how much is your money in that trust? Well, I ain't got any. Well, we go to the judge. How much are you going to give him then? Well, I don't know yet. I haven't decided. It's my discretion. I'll tell you as and when I decide. But I'm not. I don't know. Right? So that's for me to decide in the future. That's discretionary. You cannot pin any of the trust on any of the individuals because it's not been decided yet who gets what. It's discretion. Or their discretion. Yeah? So here's a little bit of a tip. The worst trust that you can ever see is when it says you all get a third, or 50-50, my children in equal shares. Because then if your children are getting divorced, the husband or wife could say, well, it says in trust you get 50%, so that must be true. So then I'm going to put 50% into the divorce settlement. You don't want that. You just want the trust having potential beneficiaries. And then saying the trustees will decide, when they decide, what the beneficiaries are going to get. We might have a little secret letter that was given to the trustees, say, look, treat Johnny and Jamie in equal shares, but that's private and confidential between the trustees and the settler. So therefore, if somebody, I've had them come to me and say, well, what does letter of wishes say then? Which letter of wishes? I don't know what you're on about. I go on. And even if I did, you know that I don't have to show you it. Because under law, I'm protected not to show you it as a trustee. That's a private and confidential document. So a lot of trusts that I see, statutory ones, have, because the client wants, I want to make sure that my children know that they're getting 50-50 each. So it's in the trust. Well, it's not protecting nothing. Because you've already given the demarcation line of 50-50. You can't argue 50% is not mine, because it says it in the trust. So what you have in the trust is you don't have that. It's very ambiguous. I treat, here's my potential beneficiaries, in my situation, Jack and Grace. Well, what they're going to get? I don't know. That's up to trustees. Well, they're going to get something. Might do. Might never do. And that's what, even in the statutory world, the discretionary nature, third parties can't make a claim against the beneficiaries because it's of a statutory nature. However, because if it's a statutory nature, it has to adhere to the statute book, whatever that statute book says. Yeah? So if you own assets that are in a statutory trust and they are taxable assets, like a capital gains tax situation where it's a buy-to-let property, then you are going to pay capital gains tax because it's in the statutory framework. It's only the private trust that wouldn't pay tax. Okay. So everybody clear jurisdiction. If you want to protect your assets, a will's not going to do it. It can't do it. It's not built for it. It's a bit like saying to me, take my car onto the water and try and get over to France. It's not happening. And a will not protect. Right? A trust will, but then just like you, the trust can either be in the public or in the private. If it's in the public, the statutory world, then it has to adhere to the statute book. And the statute book, for one, says you can't put more than 325,000 in there without paying some tax. Okay? The private trust is like the private person is renounced. Well, the trust never has to renounce anything because it was never in the statutory world. That's a problem we guys have, wherein we've been put into the statutory world. So we've got to get ourselves out of the statutory world and into the private. If we were in the private world, then we have to consent to things. So you have to consent to tax, you have to consent to government statutes, and you have the right either to or not to. That's your choice. If you're in the public, you're the slave, and slaves have to do what their master says. And the master being the 3 crowns. And there's no point going around with that name and that all caps name and saying, I'm not driving, I was travelling. Because you were bloody driving because you're all caps name. Yeah? You might not have been charging anybody to get here, but you were still operating under privilege. So the trust can be in the public or private, and so can you. Any questions?
How do you move from the public to the private?
That's a great question. Right, okay. So, I'm going to answer that, but I'm going to give you a bit of history first, so you know how we got there. And when I give you this bit of history, you can then go and research it yourself, because I'm going to be very specific. But I'm not going to go all the way back to Justinian, 565 AD, but I'm not going to go back down to that. I'm going to zoom forward in time in my time machine to 1302. Unum Sanctum. UNUM SANCTUM. Pope Boniface. I don't think he was that good looking, to be honest, but we'll go with his name. Right? 1302 declared Unum Sanctum. He was God's representative on earth. And he owned everything. He declared he did. Right, as God's representative on earth until the Messiah returns. So everything on the earth, on the planet, was his. He claimed. In actual fact, it was unlawful what he did. But in them days, people were very religious. Even kings and queens bowed and scraped to the Pope. So us mere mortals, we're just going to go with it, aren't we? And then zoom forward to 1437, and Pope Paul III had a bright idea. Why don't we have the baptism certificated? So if anybody knows what certificate means, it means to give away. Check that out. It does. So what he was doing was the baptism in them days was the church recognising that the soul entered the body at birth. right, the spirit entered the body. And by certificating it, the parents were giving the soul to the church. So what significance is that? Well, we'll go back to 1302, Unum Sanctum, 3 trusts, sea, land and air. So basically, the crown of the air, the Vatican, now owns the soul, leaving the body lifeless for anybody to claim. So Henry VIII saw an opportunity, did he buy? He did. And he thought, well, seeing as I've got the crown of the sea, which he did, he was given it to by the Pope, which was the sea, Holy See, or SEE, which means sea in terms of water. Right, he decides to bring in the Sesta QV Act, 1540. Check this out. And what the Sesta QV Act of 1540 was all about was relief of the poor. What a nice guy, eh? But he was not really that nice, because what he meant by relief of the poor was relive. That's what he was meaning. That's his interpretation. So he breathed life back into their body. That the soul had left and gone to the Vatican. And then he claimed it. And all his estate. So all the paupers, which was the majority of England, was now owned by, under that Sesta QV Act, by King Henry. And so when you look at, which one is it? Canon 2421, I think it is. It is Canon 2421. I might have that right, I'll check that in a minute. Where it says that any man or woman that declares themselves competent, 2124, any man or woman that declares themselves competent and alive and not lost at sea, means that any tax bestowed upon them is unlawful and a fraud. That's what Canon 2124 says. Right, and no body corporate exists, so no rent can be charged. And people say to me, what does that rent mean? Well, you know that body that's got no soul in it, yeah? Well, now you're in it, you have to pay rent, which is tax. That body that you're in. That's what it means. And this is the things that they've done. And then in 1666, we've got the CKV Act, where the 1666 CKV Act declared all men and women lost at sea. And they will tell you, oh, well, it's because we had this fire of London and there was estates there that wasn't claimed, so we have to find a way of doing that. But all men and women lost at sea or beyond the seas. And until they return and declare themselves living, and when they do, all their estates and titles will be bestowed back upon them. So the 1666 Act also states if you come back living, which we get into the answer to your question, is that. So then 1668 we've got a vacant crown. So William of Orange decides he might want a bit of this vacant crown, so he comes along and says, right, what about me? I look a good king. Right, I'll be all right. And so they said, well, you can be one, but you've got to agree to be king on the basis of that you are only governed by consent. So it's the consent of the public that give you your power. And if they remove that consent, then you have no power. Simple as that. So the reason for I mention that is because that is what an act and statute is. It's the force of law by consent. And so you can go back to 1668 Bill of Rights and see, did William of Orange really say that? And yes, he did. So where we are today is, we either consent or do not consent, but we have to be in a place where we can choose that, which comes to the answer to your question. So when they certificate the birth, because you were born, you weren't birthed, by the way, you're not a ship, right? They put your name in all caps. So if you look at Oxford Style English Grammar and see what a name in all caps is, it will either say it's an acronym or it is a fiction or a corporate entity. That's what it says. Check it out.
So can you repeat that?
Sorry?
Can you repeat that, please? Can you repeat that, please?
So so if you go look at New Oxford Style English Grammar Dictionary or Chicago Manual Styles Dictionary, and you look up what a person is, and a person in capitals, which is what the human rights has got in it, is that a person in capitals is a legal fiction or an acronym. A name, or the Oxford Style Manual, a name in capitals is either an acronym or a corporate legal fiction.
Mike, do you mean your actual name written on the birth certificate?
It just says any name. It's not referring to the birth certificate, but what they do in the birth certificate, they annex the father's name in capitals to the Christian names. However, in mine, it's in lowercase.
Says mine.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
what
So
happens-
if I wasn't as stupid and to take the all caps name when I left school, I'd have been well out of the system. But unfortunately, on box 16, I think it is, where it says name after registration, mine's crossed out. So I can't change it. Yeah.
Can I ask something? What happens if you were not born in this country?
What happens if you?
If you were, I was born in Greece.
Yeah.
I wasn't born here. So,
Yeah.
is it when I became a British citizen that my name is in capital?
No, it's all over the world. This the certification, wherever. So although we've got all these kind of like countries with all their presidents and kings and queens and this that and the other, we've got to really and check this out about the three crowns, where the true power lies within the three crowns, which is DC, Vatican, and City of London. And some say there's a fourth crown, which is New York, Wall Street, Wall Street was originally for the trading of slaves. That's why they have bonds. That's why we have bonds, because that certificate is a bond, a slave bond. Sorry.
If your name on your birth certificate is in all lowercase.
Sorry?
If your name on your birth
Yeah, my
certificate
surname's in
so is
lowercase,
mine.
yeah.
So does that
Well, it doesn't get us out of it, because what happened is that when we applied for our passports and driving licences and bank accounts, that's all in the uppercase name. So the corporation was formed with the birth bond, so you still were a slave to the crown, and then they just formalised it by using the all caps name in bank account, passports, driving licence. So if you look at the New Style English Oxford Grammar Dictionary, it says that any name in word or any name in all capitals is either an acronym or it is a corporate fiction. Right? So, sorry?
Dog Latin language, yeah?
Sorry?
Dog Latin language.
Yes, absolutely, yeah.
What I'll just quickly say something. I've managed to get HSBC, I've been with them for 50 years, pre-Midland Bank.
Yes.
I had a run-in with them recently. They don't recognise me no more as the legal fiction. I put a claim in. And I've also, 2 years ago, sent an affidavit to Hancock and the rest of the crew is notice to agent, notice to principal, etc. Going back on what you said about the uppercase, because I also said do not class me as a person, because when you look into the Bible stuff,
Yeah, absolutely, yeah.
You're
What the
guilty.
Bible says.
Yeah, and I gave him 21 days to counter it, to rebut it, and I had lots of questions. He didn't.
Yeah.
And I said, if you do not come back at me as the legal fiction, as a person, as the corporation. And I said, if you do, you must come back at me in your private capacity. He hasn't. This was 2 years ago. It's quite a long affidavit that I sent. So I am not saying that they still won't exercise their acts and statutes upon the name, but because he didn't come back, I said I will not do lockdown. I will go where I want. I will do what I want, where I want, etc., etc. Heard nothing. So I will add to that. I know Veronica Chapman. I know the late great Guy Taylor taught me quite a lot. I know Roger Hayes, Veronica Chapman, as I said, and I know a policeman who I'm not going to say too much, but he had sent an affidavit as well.
Has
He's been in, yes.
Yeah.
He had sent, he'd been a policeman for 22 years.
Yeah.
I've known him a few years. He did what I did, as did Veronica Chapman and her son and a couple of other people that I know. But what the policeman has done, none of our affidavits was because they can't, because that's the truth.
Yeah.
You know, come back at it and say it isn't the truth.
Yeah, absolutely.
So it's become our law, as you know,
Yeah.
in this country. But what the policeman has done, and I'll be seeing him again soon, is he has also sent an affidavit to the Met Police. He still works for them. He never had the jab.
No.
They've been giving him a rough time.
Bet they are.
We may well be in court a few times this year. So that's just a little bit that's going on.
Well, it's interesting you mentioned the court on that, because I was going to get onto the I'm going to get onto how you get yourself in the private, and an affidavit is one of the ways. What I was going to go into is that obviously there's a lot of information on the net, whether it's YouTube, whether it's Facebook, whatever, where people are saying do this, do that, do the other, right? And it can be quite a minefield, difficult to get your head round, right? And you know, which one do I choose, right? So again, we've got to listen and see what sits right with us. Okay, I'm going to talk you through some of them now. My take on anything is that if anybody is vehemently saying you've got to do this and won't listen to any different ideas or get very irate if you challenge what they're saying, that always strikes an alarm bell to me. Because what we're trying to do is we're trying to get away from the ego, which is what is ruled by the fear-based consciousness, and we're going to try and engage our right brain, with our connection to source and our intuition. Alright? And then if we can connect to that, then we will make the right decisions for us. But if we base it from ego, then we're going to make the wrong decisions for us. And so therefore, you know, I don't care if I sit up and say, look, this is good, and you say that's a load of crap. I'm not no emotional, because I respect that you've got the choice to make what you decide is the right thing for you. So let's go through some of the things. So we'll start with the affidavit. So the affidavit is a very long-standing, formal document that is written under penalty of perjury, which is very important. And there's something else, sorry, this gentleman, what's your name, sorry?
Terry.
Terry, so Terry touched upon, which was dog's Latin. The first thing when we're doing anything in writing, are we receiving anything in writing, we must establish the language that we are going to be communicating with. So I've got a chap that has got a problem with HMRC, and I just sent a letter back stating 3 things. Well, 4 things. Can you tell me who the living man is who's making the claim? Under what jurisdiction? Yeah? Who is claiming against? And what language are you using? That's it. That's it. That's all I want to know. Up until then, we haven't got a conversation. Until I know those 4 things.
Does that mean it stays in dispute?
Sorry?
Does that mean it stays in dispute?
They wrote, the long and short of it is he did some tax planning many years ago through yours truly, you know. But the company went bust 5 years later, and the revenue are now trying to make him responsible for the company's liabilities, which is not, right? But well, I'm not going to argue that. I'm not going to argue the toss about that, because I want to know what the jurisdiction is first.
Yeah.
I want to know who's making the claim. What are they writing to me in Swahili, in English? What are they? Right? Right. I know what they're claiming against. What are they doing? Yeah. Until I establish those 4 facts, I'm not going to argue about the company being liquidated or anything like that, because now I'm starting to say, oh, you might have a claim. Well, I'm not saying that. I'm saying, what are you talking about? Yeah? So the affidavit, when we write an affidavit, we write it under penalty of perjury. That means that if I state some facts to you and you go on those basis those facts, believing that they were factual, and you suffer a loss, then you can take me to court under penalty of perjury and claim against me because I've misled you. It's a tantamount to fraud. So obviously, affidavits only contain facts.
I also put legal maxims in it as well.
Absolutely, yeah. Well, things we can put legal maxims in there. We can put quotes from the Bible. We can put the canons in there. We can put whatever we want, but and so I heard somebody want. Oh well, yeah, but an affidavit can be rebutted. Right? I just say I don't agree with it. Well, that's not true, right? Because if you just put facts in there, then just stick to that. Don't say, well, I think it's going to be sunny tomorrow. Because he'll go, well, that's not right, is it? He's saying, what do you mean by sunny? So it's got to be very clear, very concise, and very factual. I am Darren, I am a man. Can you rebut that? No. So you just put in your statement of truth, affidavit, that's who I am. And if you send that to anybody that you think may want to claim against you in the future, and you send it to them, some people say 21 days, some people say 28, some say 30, some say 40. You choose. It's your dominion. You were granted dominion over the air, the sea, the land, and everything that creepeth. Genesis. Alright, so you decide. And let's say we're going to give them 28 days. And then if that affidavit under penalty of perjury is not rebutted, after that time, e.g., the one that you've written it to states nothing, doesn't come back to you, ignores it, that is a tacit agreement to that statement of fact. They agree. He who leaves the battlefield is one maxim. Ignorance is no excuse. Oh, well, I didn't know what he meant by that. Well, ignorance is no excuse. Yeah. And always write to the living man or woman in their capacity as. So if it is Fred Smith doing business as Revenues and Collections Officer for Merton Council, the living man Fred Smith doing business as. So you're capturing both jurisdictions. Because I don't care about the jurisdiction of Merton County Council, because it can't talk. Ever had a conversation with the council? It's really difficult. Right? But like the will with the executors, it needs life breathing into it, and that's what the men and women do. So it's them that are making the claim, not the council.
I was on a Zoom last night about Darren Ward's, David Barron Ward's affidavit.
Oh yeah.
They were saying they've only got 48 hours to rebut it, and after that, it's truth and facts and.
Yeah. So an affidavit is, and you could just say, like that group does, that group stays staunchly behind the affidavit, and that's all you need. That's it. Game over. Case shut. It might be that when I tell you some other things that you might think, oh yeah, I might do that as well then. But the affidavit is you stating who you are. Remember when we first started with this talk, know thyself. Are you a corporation or you are a man or a woman? Your choice. And some people say, well, if I do this then I'm in private, Dan. Does that mean that I can't have my state pension? No, because yes you can, because you're just choosing at the moment as the all caps name. You have no manoeuvre. You're in that all caps box. Yeah? Whereas when you step out of the box and you become the private person, that doesn't mean to say that you can't come out and have my state pension for this. Nothing's stopping you doing that. You choose. I tax my car. I try not to go over the speed limit. Why? Is it because I don't want to think the government's saying? No, but I just choose to.
Silly question. When they send you a box and you put your name within the box, can you put it in lowercase?
Can you
Just put it in lowercase.
Put in lowercase? I would. Yeah, if I'm forced to fill in a form that does it, I would put either lowercase because we don't want to commit a sin by doing our signature, right? So I would do my autograph, because that's true to myself, and I would put all rights reserved on that.
Should put the full name first and second.
Sorry?
You'll put both names lowercase.
No, just my lowercase.
No, but you're saying
Colon
just your
Darren,
first
dash
name,
Paul, colon Norman, all rights reserved.
Are you putting the surname in there?
Yeah.
Okay, all lowercase.
Yeah.
I had to, last year I was 70 last year, so I had to renew my driving licence, so I wrote all rights reserved, and then my signature in red, wet ink signature over it. And it came back, they wouldn't give me it.
No.
So I had to succumb, and I had to do like what you said.
They will give you it if you're tenacious, because I know people that have got it, but they've had to, and I've said, what's your secret? And they said, we just was pains in the ass, and we just carried on, and they give us it in the end. Yeah.
I didn't do that, I just...
Yeah. You could put Postal Mechanics on it too, which we'll go into in a second. But you could put Postal Mechanics on it, which has the same effect. So that's our affidavit. We sent our affidavit to anybody that we feel that want to make a claim. That could be the heads of state, it could be the local council, it could be the greengrocer shop man who says that you're in 20p for them tomatoes that were off, or whatever. But whoever's going to make a claim, the statement of truth, I like to call it, because an affidavit is a maritime term. So I think when you use affidavit, you kind of shoot yourself in the foot a bit, because you're stepping into their world. Whereas if you use statement of truth, then that is what it says on the tin, isn't it? Yeah? And as long as it's written under penalty of perjury, in plain and simple English, then nobody's under any, they don't, that's what, it does what it says on the tin. So then, what we come back to is that, right, so what else should we do? Well, there is a thing called Uniform Commercial Code. Anybody heard of that? Yeah. Who thinks it's an American thing?
When I first discovered it about 12 years ago, I was all into it, and I looked into it to some degree. I'm not an expert at anything, let me say that, because how can you, like you said earlier? But I have a question mark with it now. Okay. I don't use it. I choose not to use it, but I'm not saying that it doesn't have certain points you can use it. So I'm not sure, so I'm interested to see what you say.
Well, I when I went through this learning cycle, dismissed UCC because many people said it was just about America. That's why I asked the question. I wasn't being provocative. I just was trying to find out where people are. Yeah, but if we look at the history, so one good bloke to read, I found, well, there's two. Robinson, I can't remember his first name, and what's his first name?
David Robinson.
Sorry?
David Robinson.
He's got a book on the UCC. It might be that, yeah. And a guy called Howard Freeman.
Yeah.
Yeah, Howard Freeman. And so this is how Howard Freeman describes it. And then I'll then give you like my little interpretation of that. Right? And I do think it's something to consider, but again, it's what sits right with you guys. So basically in 1930, the International Bank of Settlements, issued again by another pope, right, declared all central banks bust. And central banks, like Bank of England, are there to fund government, really. And they were bust. And the Crown was bust in Britain in 1816, 1815, after the Battle of Waterloo. Because the Rothschilds played a bit of a blinder on that one, but we're not getting to that, but they did. So we'll soon forward to 3032, where the Geneva Convention declared them bust. So I'm in England, and I'm going to buy some oranges in Spain. I've got this business called Darren Norman English Oranges, and I get all my oranges from Spain. So I say to the Spanish guy, I'll give you £30 sterling per kilo, because it's sterling, like the silver dollar. So that's what I'm going to give you. And he turns around and says, well, that's not really right, is it, though? Because it ain't £30 sterling anymore. Well, what is it? It's £30. The sterling bit's been removed. How did you know that? Because last time you sent me them 10 quid notes down, I realised that there wasn't 2 bars across the pound, there was only 1 bar. And then I worked out what that was. And that means it's that currency is not backed by anything anymore. Oh shit. I still want my oranges though. Right, so the whole world had that problem. Is that the commercial activities of the world were with currencies that have been coloured. So they had to colour the law. And that's why Uniform Commercial Code came in. So that governed all commerce, or the rule book, if you like, of all commerce around the globe. So, but it didn't come until 1954, I think it was. So we had a war, and then we had a coronation, and then it came in. And what it did is it coloured the law to govern trading activities that wasn't with asset-backed currency. So because I said we had to colour the currency, we had to colour the law. And so then every corporation across the world has this UCC book. And if you look at the canons, they have UCC in as well, and what the UCC is all about. Yeah? And so what Howard Freeman believes is that the law of contract, so you say, I haven't got a contract with you. There's no wedding signature. Where's your wedding signature? Come on then. Right? I haven't got a contract with HMRC. I've not got a wedding signature. Yeah, but you're operating under privilege, aren't you? Because you are using that slave name. And you're using that national insurance number, which is a bank account, by the way. Right? So therefore, by acting under privilege, and what's the greatest privilege that they give you, you are not settling any debt. Because your £10 note, and please get one out, says I promise to pay the bearer on demand. That is a credit note. I'll challenge anyone to take a substantial sum of pound notes, £10 notes, £20 notes into the Bank of England and ask them for some gold in exchange. Right? I don't think you'll get very far, and you certainly won't get any gold. You might get arrested. Right? So you are not settling debt when you go pay the car park, when you give this business £2 for your glass of water. You are setting it aside. That is the ultimate privilege. So what UCC does is it has a thing called a 308 financing statement, which states that I am rescinding all contracts implied, agreed to by the fiction, and I am becoming the agent or the secured party creditor of that fiction. Now, I'm not saying that this is your way to solve all your troubles. I'm just saying it might be one jurisdiction that you want to take care of. You might never have to use it. But the way that the game is nobody ever knows which jurisdiction we're in. And we don't know. So what we need to do is make sure that we are unequivocally in every jurisdiction the private man or woman. So if they want to get me on UCC, well, I've got my UCC financing statement. So I've got that base covered. Because when we started the talk, everything's about trust. So when anybody goes into court, you're the trustee. That's why they presume you're guilty. That's why we have presumptions of law. And the only way to rebut that presumption is turn up as a living man or woman. Because what that does is turns yourself into the beneficiary of the trust and not the trustee. The trustee's job is a fiduciary capacity by an office on oath. And he's saying, out of good conscience, I am going to manage these trust assets in the best interest of these beneficiaries. So the tiles falling off the roof of the house, the beneficiaries living in the house, the tiles falling off, going to get wet. What's the trustee's responsibility? To go into the trust fund, replace the tile, to look after the beneficiary's best interest. Because if he doesn't, that asset will decrease in value. And depending on how the trust is written, he could be liable, or she could be liable. So the trust is a fiduciary office stating, I will look after the best interests of the beneficiaries, and their job is to discharge liability. So you walk into court as the beneficiary of the trust. Then you don't have to discharge liability, somebody else has to. Normally the clerk of the court or the judge. Yeah? But if you walk in there and they say, all rise, because we're paying homage to the dead. All rise. Okay. And you rise. What's your name? Dan Paul Norman. Alright, okay then. Join them. So you're the trustee, you're guilty. Discharge the debt. Do as you say. That's why they can get you into contempt in court for civil matters. Because you are your trustee, you're in contempt. You're incompetent in your office. But if you turn around and say, and I've got a friend that done this recently, give the court their common law birth certificate, said this is us, we're the living men, we want it on the record that we are the living men, we're here. They didn't like it, the court got shut down.
Really?
Seriously.
How do you do that?
And that's twice he's done it.
How do you change that into?
Well, he's registered, not registered, because I know everyone jumps on the name, and, oh, registered with common law courts, right, that's right, they're on your birth certificate. No, he's recorded in the book of record, his birth certificate under common law. So now he stands under common law. And he went and he get his birth certificate, printed it off, and he took it to the clerk, and then there you go,
You can do that.
that's me. Darren, living man. Darren Paul Norman's not here, Darren Paul's here. Here he is.
Yeah.
Right? I'm standing under common law. Didn't like it. So when they walked in, when the judge walked in and all rise, they sat down. Didn't rise. So then they had this big debate about they were not following court protocol. And so they asked, where does it the living man has to observe that? Because no man or woman has any bounds over another man or woman. That's the law. That's natural law. No one has bounds over each other. You act in the best interests of everybody. Do to others as you would to yourself. No harm, no loss, no injury. Protect your estate. That's common law. That's just natural law. The reason why they called it common law, because when we were all back 1,000 years ago, we were working the land, we couldn't read or write, but we knew the difference between right and wrong. So the common man could understand it. So if he nicked a chicken, he knew he was doing wrong. He might have been starving, but he knew that that was stealing. Yeah, we knew what's right. We know that. We know inherently, we know in our heart when we do something wrong. That's all natural law is. Yeah? The law of the soil for individuals, the law of the land for the collective. Yeah? So that's what he did. He said, I'm the living man.
And after that court case,
So
nothing was...
shut it down. Said, oh, we're going to have to come. The excuse was, we're going to have to come back for further evidence.
Right.
You see, for me, things are quite simple, quite logical. I'm a man or a woman. Why do you have to come back for more evidence? Right? Does that mean that you haven't got it now? So why did you call this then? What we're doing here? Yeah? Why did you want to come? Because the trick is, he thought they were the trustees. So they were guilty already. That's the presumption. You don't have to have any evidence. You're a trustee, mate. You're guilty. Discharge the debt.
So if you get court summons, which is invitation,
Yeah.
can't you just write back and say no contracts and not?
You
not
can
turn
do.
up?
You can do. You can do. You might want to turn up with a living man. It's up to you. There's loads of different ways of doing it. It's a bit like how do you get into the private? There's loads of different ways of doing it. How I did it, I recorded my birth and my fiction and my house and my car under common law. Got that base covered. Some people will argue that's a load of crap, don't do that. Fair enough. I just thought it was a good idea. Right, I've done my UCC 308 financing statement. Do I completely rely on that? No, but it's in the locker. It's in the toolkit. And have I written my notices to the Sinister Seven? Yeah. Right, because I've let them know who I am. Yeah? Now, let's be fair. It should be simple as saying, oi mate, no one told my mother about being an informant, so I'm just rescinding it. But we're not in that consciousness. We're not in that developed yet. You know, we've got people, you talk about police officer, a mate of mine said to a police officer, what would you say then if I said to you, I'm a living man? Prove it. That's what he said. He said, I'd ask you to prove it. So he carries his little wallet in his car and he says, I'll stop you there. If you want a contract with me, I've already told your governor and he's not rebutted it. Here's my paperwork. You give me your paperwork, but if you take my paperwork, it's going to cost you. Right? You want a contract with me, then it's going to cost you. Yeah? Because that's our right. So this isn't about anarchy or being, terrorists. It's about knowing who we are. And we all want a fair world. That's what we want. Yeah? So that's all we're after. So we should be in complete synergy. There were those that ruled because that's apparently what they want. So these sort of things aren't controversial. It's just educating ourselves. Like I say, you might think some of it's good, you might think some of it's bad, you might think all of it's a load of crap. That's up to you. I've given you some snippets there of how you get into the private. You could use David Barron Ward's affidavit. I'm not saying there's anything wrong with it. You could go to Liz Nolson's Universal Law Community Trust and be part of that and swap kindness credits instead of money or slave tokens. As you
Was that Emma Bean?
Sorry?
Was that Emma Bean you said there?
Was that?
The lady you just mentioned.
Liz Nolson.
Liz,
So
okay.
Liz Nolson runs Universal Law Community Trust and they basically don't swap money. You put in 5 hours of work, whatever your chosen profession is, and then you all swap it in that community. Yeah? So that's her way of not being in the system. And then you've got Michael O'Byrne-Sears, Universal Community Trust. Michael's sort of more after the mortgages and the money that's going to come off the mortgages in terms of compensation. Because again, that's another contract that's flawed, you see. The mortgages is different from UCC, because the mortgages, there is a wetting signature. So therefore there is a performance of contract under the law of equity. And did they perform to the contract? So I'm the bank, I'm lending you 200 grand. So I say, I'm going to get 200 grand. Go buy your house now. So you say, oh, thanks for that, Darren. What's the crack then? Oh, you pay it as back though, and some interest. You go, all right, then, hey, how much interest? Oh, I'll charge you 5% a year. Great, okay. So let's just be clear, Darren. You're going to give me 200 grand, yeah, and I'm going to be able to buy my house, good, and I can pay that over 25 years. And I'll pay the principal sum plus the interest. Is that the deal? Bang on. And a few years later, you write to me and say, Darren, that 200 grand that you lent me, yeah, where did you get it from? Ah, you.
Yeah.
What do you mean? Yeah, you give me it. How did I give you it? You signed. And I accessed your first trust fund. And I got that, then put it into my accounts and lent it to you. So when these mortgage companies are asked, where did you get the money from? They're not really too happy to explain that one to you.
Has anyone ever accessed a Cisco trust?
Sorry? Oh, has anyone... My personal view of that is a bit of a bridge too far for us these days. We haven't even got 90% of the population or even 9% of the population knowing that there is one. Right? But don't forget, under the 1835 Wills Act, the Foreign Scientist Trust and the Five Commissary Trust, they became a secret. So how can you access something that somebody doesn't actually say that exists?
Yeah. Is this a thing called sovereign reserve?
Sovereign Reserve. Oh yeah, they're the ones that do the credit cards and personal loans.
Is that a thing? Is that...
Well, they by all accounts, they've had some good successes, yeah, because what they do is Sovereign Reserve, they pay the credit card company up or the loan company, it's got to be unsecured, and they pay them with a form of a promissory note, from what I understand. I'm not in their inner circle. I am an agent for them, but I'm too busy with trusts that I can't, but apparently they have had some, they've got an instrument of repayment that the lender has to take. That's what they're getting said. So they give the lender, so the debt is repaid. So it doesn't affect your credit record. They also have a company called Mortgage Free where they do the mortgages, but that takes a lot longer because that mortgage is a bit like council tax. There's that much money that they don't want it uncovered because it's just going to, you imagine, 13 million mortgages in the UK, an average of 200 grand, let's say. That's some money.
Can I ask you a question that I'm not sure of the answer?
Okay.
And I see that you know things that I don't. I met the Venetian about 10 years ago, Michael Venetian, and yes, he's marvellous regarding the mortgage stuff. And
yes.
Yeah, he's dead on, he's right. But what I have a big question mark, because you started off this morning with jurisdiction, what he's trying to do with people like Hancock and so forth, or
yes.
Willie and so, to me, he's moving in their jurisdiction. So how can you get remedy from their jurisdiction when he's trying to bring these people, these persons as I call them, to a Nuremberg court?
Well, it's very difficult, isn't it? Because the judiciary are also in that jurisdiction and they rule that jurisdiction. So the problem is that the only way that you, like I've just talked about, of getting, a fairer world for everybody, is when enough people wake up to the fact that the current world is unjust. Yeah? Because the problem with, if you look at the Metropolitan Police's recent foray into the criminal investigation, they did nothing. They never interviewed anybody, whether the accused or the accusers. They never interviewed anybody.
There was a crime reference number, apparently.
Yeah, well, but you can see what's happening. The crime reference number is to keep all us lot quiet and then tell all the masses, look at them idiots. Right, they believe that there was a crime reference number and they were going to get taken to prison. No, we just look like we're doing something.
Let me add to what you said there. What you're saying is perfectly right, because the policeman that I know, when we heard about going to, was it King's Cross police station for 6 hours, the policeman, I'm not going to mention his name, he said to me, Terry, nothing could get done about it. It's just...
If you look at Out of the Shadows UK, for example, and they tell you what happens, again, that's just another reference point. I'm not saying that I'm endorsing it or anything, just saying it's all this is good information to share so that we can all make our own conscious decisions. But I think the problem is as you just said there, is that they'll give you the little mice, a little snippet to nibble on, keeps you happy for a bit. It's all bread and circus. See, all this goes back. You don't see this, but it goes back to Rome. Right? And the Romans were plebs and were incompetents. I'm talking about the people, in the eyes of the Senate, were plebs and incompetent. And so what they would do is they would put on some show for 3 or 4 days in the Colosseums, tribute to Rome, tribute to our last success in wherever, Germania, and look at these heroes. And the little poor old Spartacus types were sent to like lambs to the slaughter. The general population got free wine and free bread and food, right? And it was bread and circus. And whilst they were all enjoying these games, the Senate was passing laws to subjugate them even further. It ain't changed, right? So I believe that the key to this is that the people I think when you know something's not right, you just can't get away from it. It's like an itch that you've got to scratch.
Yeah, I was like that when I first obviously woke up to the pandemic when my husband was ex-husband was in the army and he was completely fell for it. I think when it got to April, May, I was I knew something wasn't right, but I didn't know anyone else that felt like
well, this is why these things are...
I felt like I was going mad, honestly. A lot of my family were like, you're so selfish, and then when I realised there's other people that could look into it, I was like, oh my god, I'm not on my own. I'm not actually going mad. It was just surreal.
Everyone went through that.
It was a great experience.
But the thing is, remember, it's about energy.
Yeah.
Right, it's about the spiritual nature of our core being. that is rising. That's why you know what you know, but you don't know why you know it. Yeah, it just doesn't sit right with it. Yeah, yeah. So this is about, for those that know, you're in your spiritual evolution, into the knowing. You will then step into the remembering. So you remember why it's a load of shit, basically, right? But you are in the knowing now. Those that are asleep, there's nothing wrong with them. They're just playing their part in the play. It's all a play. And if they wasn't there, we wouldn't be as so elevated, would we? So they've got their part to play, and there doesn't have to be a lot, as many as people think, because the energy of the planet is carrying on the ascension. So you can either ride that wave of ascension, or you can step off it and let it go. That's our free will choice. But the energetic ascension of the planet is that but humanity, if you want to call us humans, or men and women, win. Right? We evolve. If you think about it, 1% rule the world, 2% do the bidding, so that's 3. Right? So if there's 4% that are awake, then there's more than 3, isn't there? So we're all right. We don't need loads. Yeah? Yeah. But more, what is more important is not what I've said today, whether it's factual, right, wrong, or whatever. It's what you use with it and how you develop it yourselves, because that is that your free will is the most important thing, and that creates the vibrational increase. Right? That's what, because if we think about it logically, and I don't expect everyone to agree with this, but if this is just a vessel, this is just a car that I'm in for this 70, 80, 90 years, and then I ditch the car, and then I jump onto a new Porsche one or whatever, right, in my next life, right, then I just look at this as an experience rather than an emotional baggage about it. So therefore, if I know that that's going to happen, and I also know that I had a ladder in the previous life, and a Skoda in that other life there, and this and the other, and then a cart and horses in this, and a chariot in this other life before me. If I know that I've been here before, and I've done it, and I chose to be here, that's the first thing. So it isn't all shit, because I chose it. So it can't be, because I'm cleverer than that. So, and we all are. So when we know that we chose to be here, and we're going to help with the exciting evolution of our consciousness, and then things start opening up that you can't believe. I mean, I can't believe. I've got, and Laura's been at my house with Jay, and I've got this big crystal, haven't I, in the hallway. And it was about that big. Well, I can't lift it on my own, but it doesn't have to be that big for that. But right. And I say to people, "Oh, what's that there for?" I said, "A lot of energy in that, mate." And they go, "Well, it's a rock." I say, "Yeah, I know, but it's got energy." "Well, how do you know it's got energy?" "So you can feel it." So they go, "No." So I said, "Put your hand on it." So they lay a hand on it. Can't feel nothing. I say, "Rub your hands together." Clap up. I go, "Nah, I can't feel anything." Right. Let's put it this way. Put your hand on your heart and just say, I forgive myself, and I'm going to feel the energy of that rock. Just do that. Just do it. Just release yourself from all inhibitions. Bloody hell! And they put their hand on it, and it's like, oh, it's loads of energy coming from it. And the difference is that we block things off. But by putting, so we have all those abilities. We can heal with our hands. Right? We can use crystals to heal and change people's moods. I've had ladies that have said, "Oh, I've got terrible time of month pains," and I say, "Have you got anything orange?" "What do you mean? Have you got any orange crystals or anything like that?" And I normally carry some with me, so here, this one, it might be carnelian, it might be red, it depends, but anything orange, red. And then they put them on the tummy, and I said, "Just sit there, quiet, just go quiet. And just sit there, just shut your eyes, just relax, everything's great." And they do. And then the pain goes. "Oh, well, I haven't been to a doctor." Right, we'll tell you to put that, I think you're crazy.
She's the doctor.
But that is just a very, very small example of the power that we have. And that's what they don't want to wake up. That's why the pineal gland is shut down with fluoride. So they don't want it. Sorry, you had a question.
Oh, it was back some way. It was just in the quick aside, the common law birth certificate, where does that come from?
So you go on to common law courts. It's on www.commonlawcourts.co.uk or .com, I can't remember. And then you have to log in, so you have to register yourself in the site. And then it'll have birth certificate record, legal fiction record, and it's got them all there. They are actually coming out with diplomatic passports. They're soon to be releasing them.
I've seen the change in the common law website of what it was when it first started, like 2 years ago, to what it is now. They've got lots more that you can do, and it's worth doing. Like you say, you know, put all the tools you need in the box.
I printed mine off, the birth certificate, or did they send it to you?
Well, you can go, once you got it, then you wait a couple of days, and then it'll say it's in their book of records, and you can go into their book of records, put your name in there, and then it'll bring your birth certificate up that says you stand under common law, and then you can print it out and carry it around.
So I've just printed it up.
And same with the fiction as well.
Or you just print it.
Just print it, or you can have it on your phone, whatever you want. But yeah. Now, and I'm not saying that is your. I mean, they're doing their own number plates now and registering. You can register your car with them instead of DVLA and take it away from that jurisdiction. And look, I'm not saying that you can go down the motorway and drive 100 miles an hour now because you're under common law. Because I mean, that's still, you know, no harm, no loss, no injury, acting in honour. So when people, I mean, somebody said like prior to this, and they was having a go at it. This is about acting in honour. Let's not be mistaken. This is not about getting away with anything.
Yeah.
This is about acting in honour, right, and being your true self. Yeah. Then they said, own nothing and control everything. That's out of Klaus Schwab's. No, it's not. It's actually from J.D. Rockefeller, who was talking about trusts. Because in a trust, you own nothing. I put all my assets into a trust. I now own nothing. So if somebody wants to make a claim against me, I don't own it. The trust owns it. The trust has been an instrument in law for a very long time. Yeah? So, if I don't own it, I've given it to my trustees to look after and manage on behalf of my beneficiaries. So if somebody wants to make a claim against me and there was no controversy at the time that I set up the trust, like I wasn't getting divorced or HMRC weren't trying to get money out of me and I've just put this 2 million in this trust to get it away from them, and the best time to make a trust is when there's no controversy that exists, okay, then no claims can be made against that trust on my behalf. They can't say, Darren Norman owns this, so that trust owns that. No, it's a separate lawful entity. Just like if any of you guys got a problem with your council tax and they wrote to me and said, well, you was with them on Saturday, so you should pay for their council. Get lost. It's their problem, not mine. Because the claim is against that fictional entity of your name, not me. And it's the same with the trust. The trust protects. Claims are invalid because the trust hasn't entered into any controversy. It hasn't even, if it's private, stepped into the shipping lanes of United Kingdom Limited and England and Wales Limited. He was never there. I've never been on those waters. I've always been on the natural law side. So therefore...
Ask a question about the birth certificates and children.
Yes.
So if we wanted to do that for...
You can do that under common law courts as well. You can do the children's birth certificates. I would always use, as Terry says here, an affidavit, a statement of truth, stating that the children are your property. I would definitely have that.
If they're over 18 then they have to do it themselves.
Sorry?
If they're over 18, do they have to do it themselves?
If it's over 18, yes they do, because they can no longer be your property.
Okay.
I think it's actually, if you look at ecclesiastical law, it's easy for me to say, it's 21, where they become of age and become their, because what you are is the mother is the guardian for their estate. the executor for estate until they become of age. So you can't put them in a trust when they're over that age, or you can't claim them as your property. You can put them in trust if they're under 18, yeah.
What if they don't have a birth certificate?
Sorry?
What if they don't have a birth certificate because they've not been registered?
What if?
They don't have a birth certificate because they've not been registered, and they still go in.
If they don't have.
They're not your birth certificate.
Well, they haven't got one. They haven't got one.
They don't
for
want.
registration.
Oh, right, so you've never registered. Great. Don't worry about it then. Right? Because you see, what the rich do, the rich don't have a birth certificate. They have a record of birth, being born, in normally the family Bible, yeah, or the local parish church, but they don't not certificate. They never jump into the waterways, the shipping lanes. They never do.
Can you go? I've got 3 kids. Can I go and get the record of birth? I've tried it with my last, and they promised it was in my welcome pack when we got home. I was opening it up and it wasn't there.
Yeah.
Who's that from?
From the hospital.
Yeah.
Right,
Oh, really?
Like birth certificate, because I asked for it specifically with my last
Yeah.
daughter, and they said, yeah, it was a bit of a backwards and forwards. They didn't know why I wanted it.
Yeah.
I said, look, I want it. It's my property.
But-
And I saw it and they said it didn't exist, and I saw it in her paper. I said, there it is.
Yeah.
That's the form there. That's what I want.
Yeah.
And they said, okay, we'll put it in your welcome pack when you go home.
If you
I
can
didn't
get hold
check,
of
I'm
that,
so silly, I didn't check. When I got home, it wasn't there.
if you can get hold of that, then if you can, people, that's a strong thing to get hold
The
of.
live birth piece of paper from
Yeah.
last
10 years ago.
Yeah, so
Yeah.
it
But
gets
it's a bit
rid
like
of
trying to
it.
get a local title.
Sorry, like Sandy was saying, when you haven't done that, it's a good thing in what sense?
Sorry?
When you haven't registered them.
Well, if you haven't registered, then you're not in their system, so then they have no bounds over you. Just don't make sure. I would still follow the same processes of what we're talking, that you do not consent to acts and statutes and that you are living.
So,
But if they're under 18, then you can put them under common law, and also I would still have them in my affidavit. I'm calling it affidavit. I know somebody will jump on and say, you told me not to say affidavit, but it's just because everybody understands what a bloody affidavit is. But I would have it in my statement of truth that they are my property.
I remember
So you haven't
Brian
registered?
Gerrish once saying some lady, this is when we used to do the Kent Freedom movements.
Yeah.
We got shut down in the end. This is a long time ago now. And there was a lady, she didn't know all this stuff. There was some issue with the child
Yeah.
where social welfare had got involved.
Yeah.
And they came along and took the child.
Yeah.
24 hours or 48 hours later, they brought the child back. Now this, I know Brian Gerrish, I trust and like Brian Gerrish personally. The child hasn't been registered. We've got to return.
You've got
the
to,
child.
the first thing social services want is that birth certificate. I've had that off loads of sources, even from social services people as well. They want the birth certificate. They get that, even though it's not ID.
So the mum can do it without the father's being involved.
Say that again.
The mum can do this for the children without the father.
Part small children without.
The mum can get the children's birth certificates under common law.
Yeah, you can do that. Yes.
Without the father.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, there is parental responsibility rights, but that's another topic. But yeah, you can. You don't need the father because you were the informant.
so if you're without a birth certificate, when it comes to growing up and getting a job, and they require a national insurance number,
Yeah.
what happens then if you haven't got a birth certificate? If you're not,
Well, you'll have a
if
national
you're not
insurance
registered in
number,
the
won't you?
system, because they're generated automatically.
Yeah.
National insurance numbers.
From the certification.
So if you're not
Sorry?
registered, you're not going to get one. So you just have to apply for one ad hoc.
I don't know the answer. I don't know.
You get an NHS number, don't you?
I don't know.
You get an NHS number.
I've never been in that position. Unfortunately, I got one.
So trying to get the life certificate of birth back, so me going back now to try and get the free for my kids, is it as easy as that, or will I have to
What, getting the live?
go back to the hospital and get them the free live birth certificates for my kids?
Well, I think as you said, they don't like releasing them, do
No.
they?
Didn't want to give it to
You
them.
just got to be tenacious, but you can do what's called a a Live Live claim which was done through David Wynne Miller and Russell J. Gould. They do one. I'm not completely confident in that myself. I haven't done that because David Wynne Miller and Russell J. Gould fell out. Everybody know who David Wynne Miller is?
Yeah.
Yeah. So they fell out, didn't they? And David Wynne Miller says that you've got to write your own Live Life claim, right, and don't pay for it. Then his mate Russell J. Gould starts selling them. So, and it's in all capitals, and it's underlined. I know a lot of it's syntaxed, which is fair enough. But yeah, so you can do that. But if you can get it off the hospital or or go get the ecclesiastical deed from the church if you know where you're.
To give it to you about really, I would have thought because it's my property, isn't it?
Yeah.
But then can't you just register your child with the common law courts?
Well, yeah, of course you can.
Without
yeah,
needing.
yeah. If I've got a child under 18, and I haven't, I know I don't look old enough, but if I had a child under 18, two things I'd be doing: common law court and in my trust. Oh well, three things: statement of truth, my property, and my dog.
Everything.
Yeah.
They sent me a few things to register them. Like they sent me 3 letters, so 2 letters, and then a notice requiring a qualified informant to register the birth. So I kind of, at that point, I was like, right, okay, he's now.
So did you not register the
No,
birth?
he's
No,
not
well
15
done.
months. So I've then sent them a notice to denial consent to register a birth because it's. And then a conditional acceptance in the same one because I should have said the denial first, but I sent them both at the same time, and I gave her 7 days to reply, and she hasn't responded, and she gave me a month to register.
Well, you've not put them in their system, so what?
No.
Their only way of recourse for them is to come after you.
She's used that to apply for passport.
So you need to get into the private as well. So because all these things that we're talking about, we want to do it from our private capacity because remember under UCC it could be argued that you're the slave and you're the transmitting utility, so therefore you're under their powers. So you can only do what they tell you can do. So you've got to sort of segregate yourself away from that and put yourself in the private. If you want to.
Applying for a passport.
Sorry?
So if you apply for a passport, they cancel out being private and public?
Well, yeah, so what I'm saying is that, like say you don't want to register the birth of your children. Yeah. But you are the all caps name.
Mm-hmm.
So you're saying I'm not doing something that my master says I have to.
Yeah.
So your better way of doing that is to say, well actually that slave name is, I've rescinded that now, I'm the agent for that, or I've written affidavits, or I've done my common law, or I've done my at UCC, and so it's not the slave that's doing it, but the living man or woman that's doing it. It's subtle, but does that make sense? If you do anything, they come out, I'm going to put you inside and arrest you because you've not certificated the birth, because under your pledge of loyalty, of fealty to the slave, the Crown Corporation, you have to follow what they tell you to because they own that name. Yeah? Okay. So now I can argue just as strong as anyone else, but I don't have to do what you say and this and the other. But if we have our ducks in a row and we are truly operating in the private, and it's the private who's the agent for the fiction is saying, no, I'm not certificating that birth, then it's they have no, that you're out of their jurisdiction, so their control over you is weakened. I'm not saying, don't get me wrong, just because you do all these things means they all go away and they go, oh yeah, that's all right then. Because no, they'll come and try and join you all the time. They'll not stop. But this is where when you ask the question, we need more people doing this, because at the moment there's only maybe one in 100,000 saying I'm a living man or woman and I'm not registering my child's birth. Right? All the other 999,000, they're all doing it.
I mean, you didn't get the fine, did you? Apparently they threaten you with fines if you don't register, but you haven't had it. No.
I mean, she's not responded or anything. I mean, but
That just proves that they can't.
Yeah.
I'm still waiting for the census
I
file.
had one with a client who somebody from the council tax enforcement officer put a thing through the letterbox, said we're going to call any day, morning or night. So they said, oh, I said, just send a letter to us, find out where it is, send a letter saying, are you the man making the claim? Oh, thanks for your thing, through my letterbox, thanks for that. Can I just confirm you're the man making the claim? You're the living man making the claim. Letter come back, oh, that bloke's not dealing with this anymore. Somebody else is dealing with it. Oh, really? Because what happens, you see, his boss goes and says, hey, he says, I've got this thing saying am I the living man making the claim, what shall I do? He said, what, are you? Well, no, I don't want it. So, you're off the case then, and we'll get someone else. And that's it. That just proves that the key, and we got a bit sidetracked from the letters. Make sure your letters conform to proper English grammar. No all caps, no bold, no more than 2 different font sizes between sentences, no brackets, right? If you've got like, so people go, capital gains tax, in brackets CGT, well that's not even on the page, mate. Why can't you say, latterly referred to as CGT? Why do you have to put the brackets? Why do you have to put headings that are underlined? The first letter you get asking you for money normally has bold letters at the top in dog's Latin. Bye-bye, that's not on there. Right, and by the time I go through it, I'll take all the words out of there that don't apply, and you'll have something that is absolute gobbledygook that nobody could understand. Right? And it says, notice, do not ignore this notice. Underlined dog's Latin. Alright, so then I've got to ignore everything else because you just put an underline on the first sentence, which means that everything after that is off the page. You've drawn a line under it. Remember when we was all at school and you used to do essays, and then to signify the next essay you put a line under that. Yeah? Then now we're on the next essay. That's what drawing a line under it means. So they've drawn a line under the first sentence. So actually this says nothing. Thanks for your letter. What was you trying to say?
It ends there, basically.
Yeah? What was it? What? Remember, what language? Who's the man making the claim or woman making the claim? Who is the claim against? Yeah? And what jurisdiction?
And those 4 questions can be sent to any...
Sorry?
Those 4 questions
Anything.
any corporation.
Yeah, anything. Just say, simply ask that. You've got all these conditional letters of acceptance go, blah, 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 blah. Well, alright, send a conditional letter of acceptance, but you're in the public, so you're in the shit anyway. Alright, so all these people sending conditional letter of acceptance, it might work, but you've got to basically, in those letters of acceptance, put an affidavit in, as Terry says, that states who you are.
So can you just repeat that, Darren? Is it like, in what language who's making the claim?
There was 4 points.
Repeat the 4 points. The 4 things you just said, so you can write down.
Sorry?
What was the 4 points?
Repeat the 4 points. So who's
4
making
things
the
we
claim?
said, yeah. So language, jurisdiction, who's making the claim, and who is the claim against.
Not necessarily in that order, but does it have to be in that order?
No.
It doesn't matter.
Yeah, it doesn't matter what order. Yeah, it just, that's what we're trying to establish. Thanks for your letter. Can you explain to me what language you're using?
So what about if you've got a speeding fine, or
Yeah.
Dartford Crossing non-payment fine that I just happened to.
I'm going through one of those at the moment,
Yeah.
And again, can you do that and send it
Right,
back?
okay, so here's mine. This is a bit controversial, and some people will agree with it and some people won't. If you have not got into the private and you get a PCN or a thing, it's arguable you've got to pay it. Right, because the person it's after is a fiction, and you have done nothing to divorce yourself away from that fiction. So if I was fighting for them, which I'm not, I would say, you might tell me that you were doing commerce, and you might say that you were travelling in your conveyance. But what gives you permission to travel? Your driving licence. Who is on that driving licence? Your name in all caps. So therefore, you was conducting commerce. Because have you ever told anybody that that isn't you?
Darren, what if the vehicle's registered in a company name?
Well,
and
if
you
it's
get a
registered
fine,
in the
I mean,
company name, then the company's got to pay because the company is a statutory
It
instrument.
has to pay.
Right,
Yeah.
so
Yeah,
wouldn't
it's a
that,
statutory instrument.
wouldn't that apply for to the driving licence authority, because you're just a registered keeper? Could you not send the bill to them?
Well, you could. I know all the arguments what I can say, but I just think purely, if I've divorced myself from the fictional name and I've clearly, out of honour, explained to those who would want to make a claim against me that I am the living man, I've copyrighted my lowercase name so no one else can use it, I've done all those things, then I'm just that's the best I can do. If you said to me, Dan, I've got a piece saying, what shall I do? Well, I can definitely help people. I don't do that, but I could just definitely point you in the right direction to get you away from it. But purely, have you separated yourself from that fiction?
But if the vehicle's in the company name, and
Well, if
it
it's a
has to
company
pay,
name, then the company has to pay
yeah,
for
but
it.
there's no one there, is there? Because it's a dead entity.
What, you mean your legal fiction name?
No, my name's not even. I'm backwards and forwards with you.
So if it's like Joe
my name's
Blogg's
not even-
Investment Limited,
Yeah.
or Gary's Cars Limited, yeah, then the company has to pay out of the company coffers because it's a company is the fiction, definitely under statute, and then it just depends. But if the company's the owner of the car, so if the company's, I know all about DVLA and they only own the chassis number and the registration plate, but at the end of the day, I've got my nice little red car outside. I want to see it crushed. Alright? So I'm going to play the game. Yeah? If it's owned by Darren Norman Investment Limited, then Darren Norman Investment Limited will pay the fine. Right? If it's owned by Darren Norman lowercase, then it's not. Because I have separated that away from the limited company.
But in the normal scheme of things there, the first charge they put to you is that you have to supply the name of the driver.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
They're not asking for the
I
name.
don't have to give it.
If you don't, you get fined.
My partner who I'm with, she stayed in a car park for 2.5 hours, and I've been doing this stuff for getting on for 20 years. Anyway, Darren's perfectly right, in my opinion. I sent 2 notices. The first notice was, Kevin will tell you what my stuff's like. I mean, I put a lot in it.
Yeah.
Okay, I said, if you come back at this, you've got to rebut every point.
Yes.
And I'd give 27 questions.
Yeah.
Right? They didn't rebut anything.
No.
Okay? They just played on this stupid Road Traffic Act, which doesn't exist.
Yes.
Okay? So I sent them a second one back. Right? Again, I talked about duty of care, torts, maxims, everything. I threw in.
Yeah.
I spent a total of over 40 hours. Julie said, leave it. I'm going to pay. And what I've learnt from that is, from The Art of War that I read many years ago, choose your fights.
Yes. Bang on.
Is it worth 40 hours for 40 bleeding quid? So I realised that some things, at the moment, I'm not victorious with.
Yeah.
Most I am, but it takes a long time.
Yeah. And so this is where the great thing about these communities talks, because if you've done like research like that and others have done research like that and we all share them together, then that 40 hours becomes condensed and then you can fight the system, but at least fight it from a position of strength, and that is that you are the living man or woman.
We're all roads are shipping lanes, also postal roads, yes?
Yeah, absolutely.
Can you put is it true that you can put a stamp on the back of a driving licence?
Well, that's we did allude to that earlier on, didn't we?
Postmaster.
Yeah. Become the Postmaster General of the piece of paper, the piece of paper that you sent, and the piece of paper that's making the claim, and the piece of paper that you're sending back to say you're rebutting the claim. You're not accepting the claim. So everybody understands what the postal mechanics is. So basically, if we was all found a little island off the coast somewhere, first thing we do is build a post office and put a flag there. Because we would be the highest authority on that landmass. The Postmaster General is always the highest authority. The Postmaster General of the UK is a Queen. Okay? Let's be clear, we're not looking to become Postmaster General of the United Kingdom, because we couldn't be. But we can become the Postmaster General of any letters that we send out, and any letters that we receive. And this is how you do it. I prefer all letters to go out on blue bonded paper. Postal blue bonded paper. Okay? I don't want my thumbprint in red, because I don't want the court to throw it out as a biohazard. So I'll do that in blue. And I've got my letter. On the top right hand corner, I put a denomination of 1 penny stamp, pound stamp. Normally a penny because I'm a tight northerner. Right, so in the top right hand corner I've got my penny stamp. I've got my name printed, :Darren Paul Norman, date underneath it. I then take it to the post office and I say, can you cancel the stamp please? So they put a cancel, that shows that I've paid my stamp duty. Okay, I then send that letter, special recorded delivery, back to myself. I've got a little number, I put that under my stamp. When I get it back, thumbprint on the stamp, on the signature, on the special recording number, and on the paper. If I've then got a blank reverse side, I'm going to put a stamp at the top middle and a stamp at the bottom right. And then I'm going to autograph it again, date it, thumbprint, autograph, thumbprint. Because
would you put your autograph on the right
sorry?
hand side and not what they... Would you put your autograph on the right hand side and not the left side? Where
no, I don't want to be the debtor.
Yeah.
The debtor's the left hand side. I want to be the creditor all the time.
Should you write your name across the stamp? 45 degrees?
Yeah, write your name across the stamp in lowercase, :Darren Paul Norman, date, yeah, thumbprint. Or my address is always in the care of, with brackets around the postcode, yeah. So now I've got, because why I want to do the reverse is if it ever went to court and you're daft enough to ask the judge the question, can you see my evidence? And he's got it turned over and it's blank. I can't see anything in here that's relevant. Well, you can't, can you? Right? So, but when you've got the stamps on there, he knows you know his game.
Yeah.
Right? So that's why you put the stamps on the back, and sometimes I put a red squiggle there to stop it, or at least put this is intentionally left blank or whatever. But what you're doing there is you're becoming the Postmaster General of that letter. So you're the highest authority on that piece, that document. And those that have got trusts through me will see that they have stamps on the trusts, because we're making the trust the highest authority. And that's what's called postal mechanics. They don't like it, and you will get some post office that won't cancel the stamps. Yeah? So what you've got to say to them is, so what are you going to do to protect me from somebody using that stamp that I paid for? Because that's why they cancel the stamps.
So no one else can't use it.
Yeah, but they don't like doing it. But they have to. It's only because I don't understand. Yeah?
But the cancelling the stamp, is it only the first stamp on the front of your document?
Yeah, only the first, top right hand. You don't have to do the other two. Just cancel the first one. But some of them say, oh, we don't do that. Yeah, you do cancel stamps. Your post office, mate.
Is it because of the amount? Is it because of the amount of it? If you put a penny stamp, they should cancel it, whether it's a penny or a pound.
It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. But they don't like doing it because they say we don't have to. But you have to, because you are saying that you have paid your stamp duty and you want that formally proven. And the only way they formally prove it is if they cancel the stamp. Right? It's basically to stop fraud. Because in the olden days, I think I remember my mum doing it. Oh, this one hasn't been stamped, I'll get it up. I'll use that one. Yeah. Right. And so you say, well, you're committing a fraud. Because what happens if that gets used and I pay for it? And it doesn't matter that it's a penny.
But you're finding a lot of mail coming through the door hasn't got no stamps on it these days, and sometimes the stamp's not even been stamped.
Yeah, so that's frank mail, isn't it? Yeah, if it's in a window and it's franked and it's got PO box, it's internal
So
mail.
you can bin it all?
Yeah.
Chuck it in the bin?
Well, you see, you can do, that's up to you. You can send it back, say no contract, not clean hands, internal mail. There's things like that you can do. For me, I just think of things quite simple. And I think, well, I've got a letter here, I can send no contract, no clean hands, internal mail, mail fraud. It isn't mail fraud, to be fair, but I can do all that. And my mate Courtney up in the Isle of Man, he does that all the time. Right? Okay. But I just think, if I open it and I respond and tell them who they truly am, so don't get me wrong, I ain't making any contract with you when I'm writing to you, so let's just that be that clear. Right, but you sent this and you have failed to answer my previous letters. And until you do, in actual fact they're not letters, they're notices, you failed to respond to my previous notices. And I'm telling you, as a living man, this ain't going anywhere until you respond to those points on a point-for-point basis. Under penalty of perjury, so I want the living man, the jurisdiction, the colour of language that you're using, and who's the claim against. Right? Until we don't, there's no way we're going anywhere until we get past that. We can't get past that until you answer it. So I would open the letter. Some people would say don't, and again, you might not want to. But for me, let's just be clear and transparent. So if I have to go in front of somebody who's going to try and make a claim of me in one of those fake things called courts, where we play games, all right, I'm going to say, there you go. That's everything I've tried to do to clear the controversy. So the controversy ain't with me as the beneficiary. The controversy is with somebody else. That's why we're here today. Yeah? Whereas if you ignore the letters, let's come back to the tacit agreement. Could it be then that you just agree? Well, what's in it? If you say, oh, I didn't know what to do, well, ignorance is no excuse. So let's, just for me, I just open them and say, this is who I am, I've explained who I am, I've asked you certain questions, you haven't had the temerity to answer those questions, and so until you do, we can't go any further. But don't bother writing until you go and answer those questions.
So what about, oh sorry.
Hey Darren, so in essence really, establishing yourself as the living man is really the first point of call with everything.
Yeah, unless you're a woman.
Yeah. And then, yeah, exactly. Well, that's a question on this day.
I know.
But, and then, for example, like if you're trying to, put yourself into the private as opposed to the public, even in a sort of business context, so you want to, create private members, kind of private entity business as opposed to being a limited public business, you have, the first port of call is, like you said, declaring that whole living.
Absolutely, because if I get a debt for you at my door and the debt collector goes, can I see that? Well, that's not me, mate, so you better bugger off and go and find him, because he doesn't live with you.